Tonight, we will speak about letting go. By letting go, we mean something very ordinary. The way we loosen our grip on what we are holding too tightly. The way we stop carrying what no longer needs to be carried. Not pushing anything away, and not clinging to anything either. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. There is nothing to remember. There is no need to stay awake. You can listen for a while. You may drift in and out. It's okay if the words fade before they finish arriving. We will simply stay together for a while and let the night hold the rest. Long ago, in a small riverside town, there lived a potter named Amara. Amara worked with clay every day. Each morning, Amara walked down to the riverbank, lifted wet earth into waiting hands, and carried it back to the wheel. The wheel was old. Its wood was smooth from years of turning. When Amara sat before it, the world became very small and very simple. Clay, water, hands turning slowly. People from the town admired Amara's bowls. They said they were balanced, calm, and useful. Some said they were beautiful. Amara accepted these words politely, though they never stayed long in the mind. Compliments came and went like clouds, and Amara had learned not to chase them. But there was one bowl Amara could not forget. It had been made years earlier, on a quiet afternoon when the river was low and the light was soft. The clay had responded perfectly. The shape had formed without effort. When the bowl dried and was fired, it came out strong and simple, with a gentle curve that fit the hands just right. Amara kept that bowl at home. It was not for sale. It was not for use. It sat on a shelf near the window, catching dust and light. When Amara passed by, there was always a small pause, a glance, a remembering. This bowl mattered. At first, Amara did not question this. It felt natural to care for something made with such ease. But over time, the care became something else. When visitors came, Amara worried about the bowl being touched. When cleaning the shelf, Amara's hands tightened. At night, there were moments of wondering, what if it breaks? The bowl had never broken, but the fear was already there. One evening, after a long day at the wheel, Amara noticed a tightness that would not loosen. The day had been ordinary. The clay had behaved. The kiln had cooled without trouble. Still, something felt held, clenched, unfinished. Amara looked at the bowl. It was the same as always, quiet, still, waiting for nothing. And yet, Amara felt restless. We might recognize this feeling, not caused by what is happening, but by what we are holding. Letting go often begins this way, not with wisdom, but with discomfort. Amara decided to visit an old teacher who lived just beyond the town. The teacher's name was Kaido. Kaido had once been known for sharp words, but age had softened the edges. Now, people said Kaido spoke very little, and that this was the point. The path to Kaido's hut was familiar. Amara had walked it many times. That night, the steps were slower. When Amara arrived, Kaido was sitting near the door, watching the sky dim. There was no greeting. There rarely was. After a while, Amara spoke. "There is a bowl," Amara said. "I made it long ago." Kaido nodded, as if this was already understood. "I keep it close." Amara continued. "I do not use it. I do not sell it. I am afraid of losing it." Kaido said nothing. "It is only a bowl," Amara added, almost defensively, "but I think of it often." The evening grew darker. Somewhere, an insect moved through the grass. Finally, Kaido spoke. "Where is the bowl now?" "In my home," Amara said. "And where are you now?" Kaido asked. Amara hesitated. The answer was obvious, and yet not simple. "I am here," Amara said. Kaido nodded again. "Then the bowl is already far away." There was no judgment in the words, no instruction, just a simple pointing. Amara felt something loosen, just slightly. Kaido stood and went inside the hut. When Kaido returned, there was a cup of tea. Kaido placed it on the ground between them. "Drink," Kaido said. Amara did. The tea was warm, bitter, ordinary. They sat together until the sky went fully dark. Then Amara bowed and left. On the walk home, Amara thought about the bowl. The thought was familiar, almost comforting. But now there was also space around it. The thought came, and it went. This is often how letting go begins, not with throwing something away, but with seeing how far away it already is. In the days that followed, Amara returned to work. The wheel turned. Bowls formed and dried and fired. People came and went. The bowl remained on the shelf, but something had shifted. Amara noticed how often the eyes moved toward it, how the body leaned just a little, how the mind rehearsed loss that had not happened. Seeing this did not make it stop, but it softened the grip. One afternoon, a neighbor named Leon came by with a small child. The child ran ahead, curious and unsteady. Amara watched as the child reached toward the shelf. There was a moment. The bowl wobbled. Amara felt the familiar surge, the tightening, the reaching, and then the bowl fell. It hit the floor and broke cleanly into several pieces, Not a dramatic shattering, just a quiet, final sound. The child froze. Lian gasped. Amara stood still. What happened next surprised everyone, including Amara. There was sadness. Yes. A warmth behind the eyes. A sense of ending. But there was also relief. The fear that had lived alongside the bowl was gone. The future imagined losses had vanished with it. The bowl had finished being a bowl. Amara knelt and gathered the pieces. The clay was cool and rough, still recognizable, still real. Lian apologized. The child looked frightened. "It's all right," Amara said. And it was. That night, Amara placed the broken pieces outside, near the river. The water would take them slowly. There was no ceremony. Sleep came easily. We often think letting go means becoming cold or careless, but what Amara discovered was something else. Clinging had been the heavier burden. Letting go did not erase care. It returned care to its proper size. When we hold too tightly, even what we love becomes a source of tension. Our days fill with guarding, fearing, rehearsing. We protect what we think we own, forgetting how temporary ownership always is. Letting go does not mean we stop appreciating. It means we stop demanding that things stay. We might notice this in small ways. An object, a role, an idea of how something should be. We carry these quietly, often without realizing the effort involved. And then one day, there is a crack, a wobble, a moment we did not plan for. Sometimes life lets go for us. When it does, we may feel pain, we may feel grief, but beneath that, there is often a surprising spaciousness. The work of holding has ended. Amara continued to make bowls. Some were good, some were not. None were kept aside as special. Each one was allowed to leave. People noticed a change. The bowls seemed lighter somehow, more open. It was difficult to say why. Amara did not explain. There was nothing to explain. Letting go is not something we do once and finish. It is something we practice without practicing. Each time we notice the grip, we soften it. Each time we notice the fear, we allow it to pass. And sometimes, without our help, the bowl breaks. When it does, we may find that what remains is enough. The night continues in this way. Thoughts come, stories form. Some are held, some fall away. You can stay with the sound of these words for as long as they are useful. You may let them drift when they are not. Nothing needs to be carried forward. The river moves on its own. The clay returns to earth. Hands open, again and again, and we remain here, together, letting go gently, as the night holds everything else. The night moves forward without asking us to follow. It carries sounds, pauses, half-finished thoughts. We can allow it to do that work for us. After many seasons had passed, there was another person whose life touched the same quiet truth, though in a different place. His name was Renzo. Renzo lived in a mountain village where the air was thin and the paths were steep. He was a bellkeeper. Each day, at dawn and again at dusk, Renzo pulled the thick rope that rang the large bronze bell at the center of the village. The sound traveled across roofs and fields, marking time without hurry. Renzo had been doing this work for decades. At first, the bell had felt heavy. The rope burned his hands. His shoulders ached. But over time, his body learned the motion. The bell no longer felt like an effort. It felt like a companion. Renzo liked to arrive early. He would sit near the bell, resting his back against the cool stone wall. He listened to the village before it woke. A door opening, a bird settling, the faint movement of wind through grass. The bell belonged to everyone, but Renzo felt it belonged to him as well, not because he owned it, but because he knew it. He knew how long to pull, how to listen for the echo, how to stop at just the right moment so the sound faded naturally. People trusted Renzo with the bell, and Renzo trusted himself. One winter morning, Renzo slipped on the icy steps. His hand missed the rope. The bell rang late. No one scolded him. No one complained. Still, Renzo felt unsettled. His body did not move the way it used to. At first, he ignored this. He told himself it was nothing. The cold, a poor night of sleep. But the slips became more frequent. His grip weakened. The rope felt heavier again. Renzo began arriving even earlier, giving himself more time. He wrapped his hands carefully. He rehearsed the motion in his mind. The bell rang on time, but Renzo's ease was gone. This is how holding on often feels. More effort, more preparation, less trust. The village elders noticed Renzo's struggle before he spoke of it. One afternoon, a woman named Sora came to him after the bell had rung. "You've done this work well," Sora said. Renzo nodded, unsure what to say. "We are thinking of asking Talon to help," she continued. "At first, only some days." Talon was young, strong, new to the village. Renzo felt something tighten, a familiar sensation, sharp and protective. "I am still here," Renzo said. Sora smiled gently. "Yes," she said, "you are." That night, Renzo slept poorly. His dreams were filled with missed bells and empty squares. In the dreams, the bell stood silent, and no one noticed. When morning came, Renzo felt heavy with unspoken fear. He went to the bell as always. He sat against the wall. The stone felt colder than usual. Renzo realized then that the bell had become more than a task. It had become a place to stand, a way to be known. Without it, who was he? We may recognize this question. It arises quietly when roles shift, when hands cannot hold what they once did. Later that day, Renzo sought out an old friend named Mira, who lived near the edge of the village. Mira had once been a weaver, known for intricate patterns. Years ago, her sight had faded, and she had stopped weaving. Mira listened as Renzo spoke. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she said, "Do you remember the last cloth I wove?" "Yes," Renzo said. "It hung in the hall for many years." "It was unfinished," Mira said. Renzo frowned. "It didn't look unfinished." Mira smiled. "It was. I knew where it should go next, but my eyes would not follow." "What did you do?" Renzo asked. "I stopped," Mira said. "At first, I hated that word. Stopped. It felt like failure." And then Renzo asked, "And then I noticed," Mira said slowly, "that the cloth had already given what it could. The rest was only my insistence." Renzo sat quietly. Mira continued, "Letting go was not losing the weaving. It was losing the fight with time." That night, Renzo walked home slowly. He passed the bell tower. He did not go in. The next morning, Talon stood beside him, awkward, respectful, strong hands unsure of their place. Renzo showed him the rope, the timing, the listening. The first time Talon rang the bell, it was too loud. The echo lingered longer than usual. Renzo smiled despite himself. "Again," he said. Day by day, Talon learned. Renzo rang the bell less often. Some mornings he only watched. Some evenings he did not come at all. There was grief in this, a quiet ache, but there was also space. Renzo noticed sounds he had missed before. The way the village breathed without him marking every moment. He noticed how the bell still rang, even when his hands were not on the rope. The world did not stop. This can be one of the gentlest and hardest realizations, that life continues without our holding. Not because we were unimportant, but because nothing belongs to us in that way. One evening, Renzo stood at the edge of the square as Talon rang the bell perfectly. The sound was clear, balanced, alive. Renzo felt something settle. Later, walking home, Renzo realized he was not empty. The bell had shaped his days, but it had not been his life. His life was larger than any one role. Letting go had not erased him. It had revealed what remained. We often think we are what we do, what we hold, what we are needed for. And when those things loosen, fear rushes in to fill the space. But if we stay with the space, gently, we may find it is not hollow. It is open. Renzo began spending mornings with Mira. She taught him to listen to the wind patterns near her home. They did not call this teaching. It was simply time passing together. Sometimes they spoke of the past. Sometimes they sat without words. The bell rang each day. Renzo no longer worried about it. In this way, letting go became an ongoing movement, not a single event. A releasing of one hand, then another, not all at once. We may notice this in our own nights. Some thoughts fall away easily. Others cling longer. There is no need to hurry them. Letting go is not an act of force. It is an act of trust. Trust that what is finished can be finished. Trust that what remains does not need our constant grip. As the night deepens, stories like these do not ask us to remember details. They do not demand conclusions. They are simply companions for a while. Renzo's village still stands. Amara's river still moves. And we are here, listening or not listening, held by the same quiet process. If sleep arrives, it arrives. If thought drifts, it drifts. Nothing is required. The rope loosens, the hands open, and the night continues, doing what it has always done, without effort, without holding on. The night does not ask us to understand it. It moves on whether we follow the story or lose it. We can allow that ease to remain. There was once a woman named Aylin who lived near the edge of a wide plain. Her home stood alone, not because she avoided people, but because the land there suited her work. Aylin was a keeper of seeds. People came to her for many reasons. Some wanted seeds that would grow quickly. Others wanted plants their grandparents remembered. Elin listened carefully, then reached into one of many small jars lining her shelves. Each jar held a story, not written, not spoken, but carried quietly in the seeds themselves. Elin had learned this work from her mother, and her mother from hers. Over time, Elin's hands had memorized the weight of each jar. She knew which seeds needed cold, which needed patience, which needed almost nothing at all. She kept careful records, though she rarely looked at them. The knowing lived elsewhere now. There was one jar, however, that Elin treated differently. It was small, sealed with wax, and kept at the back of the highest shelf. Inside were seeds from a plant that no longer grew anywhere nearby. Elin had gathered them years ago, during a long walk to a distant valley. She remembered the day clearly, the way the air shifted, the way the plants bent slightly toward one another, as if sharing something private. She had taken only a few seeds, enough, she thought, to keep the plant alive in memory. She never planted them. Each season, she told herself, not yet. The conditions were not right. The soil too dry. The rains uncertain. But beneath these reasons was another truth. If the seeds were planted, they would either grow or fail. Either way, the holding would end. So Elin kept them sealed. At first, this felt like care. Later, it felt like weight. She found herself checking the jar often, running a finger along the wax seal. She worried about moisture, about heat, about time. The seeds did nothing. They waited. One year, a traveler named Jarek arrived at Elin's home. He was passing through, carrying little more than a pack and a long walking stick. He asked for water, and Elin offered him tea. They sat together in the quiet room. Jarek noticed the shelves. "You keep many futures here," he said. Elin smiled, or many maybes. Jarek's eyes lingered on the highest shelf. "And that one?" he asked. Elin followed his gaze. She hesitated. "That is nothing," she said. Jarek nodded, as if he understood something else. They spoke of the weather, of roads, of places Jarek had seen where the land had been stripped bare and slowly healed again. Before leaving, Jarek said, "Where I come from, seeds are planted when the hands begin to tremble." Elin did not ask what he meant. After he left, the words stayed. That night, Elin dreamed of fields she had never seen. In the dream, the sealed jar cracked open on its own. Seeds spilled into the wind. Some fell on stone. Some were eaten by birds. A few found soil and disappeared. When she woke, her hands were still. The next morning, Ellen climbed the small hill behind her home. The soil there was thin but honest. It did not promise much. She brought the jar. Sitting on the ground, Ellen turned the jar slowly. The wax seal was intact. The seeds inside had not changed, and yet they had changed simply by waiting so long. Ellen thought of her mother's hands, of seasons that did not return, of all the jars she had emptied without ceremony. She broke the seal. The seeds were smaller than she remembered. She planted them without measuring, without marking the place. She covered them gently and stood. Nothing happened. Of course, nothing happened. Ellen felt a tightening rise, regret, fear, the old instinct to protect what could no longer be protected. She let it pass. The planting was already finished. Days went on. Ellen returned to her work. People came. Jars emptied and refilled. The hill remained quiet. Weeks passed, then months. One morning, Ellen noticed a small change, a faint green line near the place she had not marked. Easy to miss. She did not rush toward it. She watched from a distance as the plant grew slowly, unevenly. It was not the same as she remembered. The leaves were smaller, the shape slightly different. Still, it lived. Then one day, after a long dry spell, the plant withered. Its leaves curled inward. The stem bent. Ellen felt the familiar ache, but it did not take root. She realized then that the seeds had already fulfilled their purpose, not by lasting forever, but by ending honestly. Letting go does not guarantee success. It guarantees release. The plant returned to the soil. Nothing was wasted. Ellen no longer checked the empty jar. She cleaned it and placed it back on the shelf, unsealed. It was just a jar again. In time, she noticed something else. Without the weight of that holding, her work felt lighter. Decisions came more easily. She shared seeds more freely. She trusted the seasons again. We often believe that holding preserves meaning, that if we keep something untouched, it stays pure. But untouched things do not stay alive. They only stay held. Letting go allows life to move, even when it moves toward ending. As the night stretches on, we may notice jars of our own, things sealed carefully for the right time, words not spoken, changes delayed. There is no need to open them now. There is no need to decide. Just noticing the weight is enough. Elin continued her work until her hands did begin to tremble. When that time came, she taught others what she could, and left the rest to be learned another way. The plain still changes color each season. Seeds still scatter, planted and unplanted, held and released. And we remain here, carried by the same quiet rhythm. Stories rise, then settle. Thoughts loosen, then fade. You can stay with the sound of this for a while longer, or you may already be elsewhere. Letting go does not require farewell. It happens naturally, as the night deepens and the holding grows tired. And so, the story continues, without asking us to follow, without asking us to stay. The night continues to widen. It does not rush. It does not gather itself into conclusions. We can allow the words to drift like that too. In a coastal town where the land met the sea without ceremony, there lived a man named Thomas. He repaired boats. His workshop stood close to the water, close enough that salt lived permanently in the air. Wood swelled and contracted with the seasons. Nails rusted quickly. Thomas accepted this. It was part of the work. Each boat that came to him carried its own history. Cracks from storms, scratches from careless landings, quiet wear from years of faithful use. Thomas learned to listen with his hands, running his fingers along the hull, tapping gently, feeling where the wood no longer trusted itself. He did not hurry repairs. He believed that a boat, like a person, needed time to admit where it was weak. There was one boat Thomas knew better than any other. It was a small fishing boat named Leora. He had repaired it so many times that he could walk around it in the dark and know every place it would creak. The owner, a woman named Sabine, had inherited the boat from her father. She fished alone, early in the mornings, returning before the town fully woke. Sabine trusted Thomas completely. When Leora came in, Thomas felt a familiar responsibility settle into his body. This boat mattered, not because it was special in design, but because it carried memory. Over the years, Thomas noticed that his repairs grew more careful with this boat than with others. He reinforced areas that did not strictly need it. He replaced boards earlier than necessary. He wanted Leora to last. One evening, after Sabine had left the boat in Thomas's care, a storm came in suddenly. The wind rose faster than expected. Waves struck the shore with unusual force. Thomas ran to the workshop. He secured what he could. He checked the boats tied nearby. The ropes strained. The water climbed higher. In the chaos, a large piece of debris broke loose and slammed into Leora's side. The sound was dull and final. By morning, the damage was clear. The hull had split deeply. Water had soaked into places that would not dry easily. The frame had shifted. Thomas stood before the boat, exhaustion heavy in his limbs. He knew what the damage meant. Leora could be repaired, but it would never be the same boat. Sabine arrived later that day. She took in the sight quietly. She did not cry. She did not ask many questions. After a while, she said, "Can you fix it?" Thomas felt the old instinct rise, the desire to promise, to hold. "Yes," he said, "but..." Sabine waited. "But it may not be worth what it will cost." Thomas finished. Sabine nodded. "Then tell me the truth," she said. "Not what you think I want to hear." They sat together on overturned crates. Thomas explained the damage carefully. He spoke of time, of money, of uncertainty. He did not soften the words. When he finished, Sabine was silent for a long while. Finally, she said, "My father repaired this boat himself many times. He knew when to stop." Thomas looked at her. He said there is a moment when fixing becomes fear. She continued, "And sailing becomes memory." They both understood what she meant. Sabine decided not to repair the boat. Thomas felt a strange mix of relief and grief. He helped Sabine remove what could still be used. The rest of the boat was taken apart and returned to the shore in pieces. For days afterward, Thomas felt unsettled. He caught himself looking toward the empty space where Leora had rested. His hands missed the familiar shape. He realized then that he had been holding the boat not just for Sabine, but for himself. It had given his work a sense of continuity, of purpose that stretched beyond individual repairs. Letting go of the boat meant letting go of a story he had been telling himself. We often do this quietly. We let objects, roles, and responsibilities anchor our sense of meaning. When they leave, the ground feels less certain. But as time passed, Thomas noticed something else. Other boats came in. New damage. New stories. His hands adjusted. Without Leora, his attention broadened. He listened more carefully to each hull. He took fewer shortcuts. His work became less about preserving the past and more about meeting what was present. One afternoon, a young person named Ansel brought in a small, poorly built boat. It leaked badly. The wood was cheap. Thomas almost turned him away. Instead, he stayed. He taught Ansel how to listen to the wood, how to know when a repair was enough. In this way, What Thomas had held was not lost. It had simply changed form. Letting go does not erase what has shaped us. It redistributes it. The sea continued its work. Boats came and went. Some were repaired. Some were not. Thomas learned to trust the timing of endings. Far inland, in a place where hills rolled gently and roads curved without reason, there lived a woman named Narration. She collected letters, not letters written to her, but letters left behind, notes found in old books, messages tucked into drawers, correspondence abandoned when houses were cleared. Narration believed that words carried a residue of the moment they were written. She handled each letter carefully, reading slowly, letting the voice of the writer rise and fall without interruption. She did not judge the content, love letters, apologies, lists of errands. All were given equal attention. Her home was filled with boxes, each carefully labeled by year and place. At first, Narration told herself she was preserving history. Later, she admitted she was preserving presence. When she read the letters, she felt less alone. One day, a friend named Calix visited her home. He moved carefully through the rooms, noticing how little space remained. "You could open a small archive," Calix said gently. Narration smiled. Then they would no longer be quiet. She said. Calix did not argue, but the boxes continued to multiply. Narration began to feel surrounded, not held. Choosing which letter to read became difficult. Each box demanded equal attention. The weight of holding everything began to dull the joy of reading. One evening, while reading a simple note about a missed meeting, Narration felt unexpectedly tired. The words blurred. Her hands rested on the paper. She realized she was afraid to let any letter go unread. Afraid that if she did not hold every voice, something essential would vanish. But the voices were already fading. The next morning, Narration chose one box. Just one. She read every letter inside carefully. When she finished, she burned them. The smoke rose quietly. No drama, no ceremony. Her hands trembled at first. Then they steadied. She continued this practice slowly, one box at a time, reading fully, letting go fully. As the boxes disappeared, her home opened. Light returned to corners, long hidden. She still collected letters, but fewer, and she no longer kept them forever. The words did their work, then were released. This is another face of letting go. Not abandoning meaning, but trusting it to complete itself. As the night carries on, these lives move gently in the background. Thomas at the shore, Nerea among letters, others we have not named. Their stories do not demand attention. They simply pass through. You may notice your own holding soften, even slightly, or you may not notice anything at all. Both are fine. The night does not measure progress. It allows. And we remain here, listening together or drifting apart, as letting go continues in its quiet, ordinary way. The night has a way of smoothing edges. What felt sharp earlier now rests more quietly. What felt important loosens its hold. There was a man named Oren who lived near a narrow bridge that crossed a slow-moving river. The bridge was old, built of stone, laid carefully by hands long gone. Oren's work was simple. He swept the bridge. Each morning, before most people crossed, Oren walked from one end to the other with a broom made of reeds. He pushed away leaves, dust, bits of mud carried up from the riverbank. He did not rush. The bridge did not require urgency. Travelers noticed him. Some nodded. Some thanked him. Many passed without seeing him at all. Oren did not mind. He had chosen this work after many years of doing something else. Once, he had managed a busy store in a crowded town. His days had been full of voices, decisions, counting. At night, his thoughts continued even after the lights were out. When he left that life, people were confused. "You are wasting yourself," they said. Oren listened, then swept the bridge. At first, the work felt peaceful. The repetition quieted him. The river below moved steadily, never asking where it was going. But over time, Oren noticed something else. He began to care too much about the bridge being clean. If someone crossed while he was sweeping, he felt irritation. If leaves fell again after he had finished, he felt a small surge of frustration. He began to see the bridge not as a place of passage, but as something that should remain as he left it. This surprised him. One afternoon, a sudden rain came. Water rushed over the stones, carrying dirt and debris. When the rain passed, the bridge was covered again. Oren stood there, broom in hand, feeling tired in a way he had not before. He realized that he had brought an old habit into a new life, the habit of holding results tightly. The bridge had never promised to stay clean. That evening, Oren sat by the river instead of sweeping. He watched water move around rocks, leaving patterns that vanished as soon as they formed. A woman named Isolde, who lived nearby, joined him. She often crossed the bridge to tend a small garden. "You didn't sweep today," she said, not accusingly. "No," Oren said. The river made a soft sound between them. "I thought this work would free me," Oren said after a while. "But I am still holding something." Isolde nodded. "We bring our hands with us," she said. "Whatever they are used to gripping, they grip again." Oren smiled faintly. The next morning, Oren swept the bridge as always, but when leaves fell again, he did not return to chase them away. When travelers crossed, he stepped aside easily. The bridge was clean enough. This change was small, almost invisible, but it mattered. Letting go often looks like this. Not a dramatic release, but a quiet adjustment. Not giving up, but easing the pressure. Oren continued his work for many years. When his body tired, another took his place. The bridge remained. The river continued. Oren did not need to mark the moment when he stopped being the sweeper. It happened on its own. In another place, further along the same river, there lived a woman named Maribel. She painted landscapes. Her paintings were not famous. She sold a few each year, enough to live simply. What mattered to her was the seeing. Maribel walked the same paths again and again, watching how light shifted across fields. She returned to the same view in different seasons, painting it as it changed. There was one painting she could not finish. It showed the river at dusk. The colors were almost right, but not quite. Each time Maribel tried to complete it, she felt a resistance. She added a stroke, then removed it. She set the painting aside, then returned days later. Years passed. The unfinished painting stayed with her through several moves. It was always placed carefully, leaned against a wall, waiting. Maribel told herself she was patient, that the painting would tell her when it was ready. But sometimes, late at night, she felt uneasy. The painting had become a measure of her skill, of her sensitivity, of something unnamed. One winter, Maribel fell ill. Not seriously, but enough to slow her. She could not walk the paths. She stayed inside, watching the river through a window. The unfinished painting stood nearby. One afternoon, feeling weak and restless, Maribel took the painting outside. The air was cold. Her hands shook slightly. She placed the painting face down on the ground. Then she left it there. Snow fell that night. Light at first, then heavier. By morning, the painting was soaked. the colors blurred, the canvas warped. Maribel felt a pang when she saw it, but it passed quickly. The painting was finished now, not as she had planned, but finished all the same. She burned it later that day. The smoke rose pale against the winter sky. After that, Maribel painted differently, more quickly, less carefully, or perhaps more honestly. She no longer waited for perfection. Letting go does not always come gently. Sometimes it arrives through accident, or illness, or weather. When it does, we meet it as we are, as the night deepens. Stories like these do not ask to be held tightly. They do not require us to remember names or details. They move like the river, one bend, then another. There was also a child named Soren who lived with his grandmother in a small house near the hills. His grandmother told him stories each night. Some stories she repeated often, others she told only once. Soren loved one story in particular. He asked for it every night. His grandmother told it patiently, though her voice tired more quickly now. One evening, she said, "Tonight, you tell it." Soren protested. He did not know it well enough. He would get it wrong. "That is all right," she said. So Soren told the story. He forgot parts. He added others. He mixed two stories together. When he finished, he looked worried. His grandmother smiled. "Now it belongs to you," she said. Years later, when she was gone, Soren still told the story. It changed each time, but it lived. If his grandmother had held it perfectly, it would have ended with her. Letting go is often how things continue. The night holds all of this without comment. The bridge, the river, the painting, the story. You may still be listening. You may already be asleep. Either way, the letting go continues. Nothing needs to be done. The words can fade now, or linger softly at the edge of hearing. The night knows how to carry what we release. The night does not gather these stories and arrange them. It lets them rest where they fall. We can do the same. There was a woman named Hannah who lived in a town where the streets curved gently, as if they had been laid out by walking rather than measuring. Hannah kept a small shop that sold everyday things: rope, candles, simple tools, nothing rare. People came to her shop because she listened. When someone asked for rope, Hannah asked what it was for, not to judge, but to understand. The length mattered. The thickness mattered. A rope for tying a bundle was different from a rope for lowering something into a well. Hannah enjoyed this quiet usefulness. Her days were steady. Her nights were calm. There was one thing in the shop she did not sell. It was an old scale, made of iron, with two shallow bowls hanging from chains. It had belonged to her father. He had used it when the shop was his. When he died, Hannah kept it, placing it on a high shelf. The scale did not work well anymore. The chains were slightly uneven, but Hannah could not bring herself to repair it, and she could not bring herself to let it go. Sometimes, when the shop was empty, she would take it down and place it on the counter. She would put a stone in one bowl and watch the other rise. Then she would switch them. It never balanced. This troubled her more than she admitted. She told herself the scale reminded her of her father, of afternoons spent watching him measure grain, his movements careful and patient. But over time, the scale became something else. A question, a reminder of imbalance she could not correct. One afternoon, a man named Lucien came into the shop. He was new to the town. He asked for nails. Hannah gathered them, then noticed his eyes resting on the scale. "That is old," he said. "Yes," Hannah replied. "It does not seem useful anymore," Lucien said, not unkindly. "No," Hannah said. Lucien nodded. "My mother kept many things like that," he said, "objects that remembered for her, so she did not have to." Hannah felt something stir. "What happened to them?" she asked. Lucien shrugged. "They stayed," he said. She did not. That night, Hannah closed the shop and stayed inside. She took down the scale again. The iron was cool in her hands. She placed it on the counter and looked at it for a long time. The scale had already finished its work. It had measured what it could. What remained was her holding. The next morning, Hannah carried the scale to a metal worker named Vesa, who lived near the edge of town. Vesa examined it carefully. "I can fix it," Vesa said. "It will take some time." Hannah shook her head. "No," she said. "I want you to melt it." Vesa looked surprised, but did not argue. When the iron was melted down, it lost its shape completely. It became something else. Later, Vesa returned a small hook to Hannah, made from the same metal. Hannah placed the hook near the door of the shop. She hung her apron on it each morning. The scale was gone. The memory remained, lighter. Letting go often changes the form, not the substance. In a dry region, far from Hannah's town, there lived a man named Bastian who kept bees. His hives were spread across a wide field dotted with wildflowers. Bastian spoke little. He listened to the hum of the bees, learning to hear when something was wrong. He could tell when a hive was too crowded, when a queen was failing, when a storm had unsettled them. He took honey only when there was enough. He believed the bees should never notice the taking. One season, a hive began producing unusually sweet honey. Bastian tasted it once and stopped. He told himself it should be saved. He marked the hive carefully. He checked it more often than the others. He worried about it through storms, through cold nights. Other hives struggled. Bastian tended to them, but his attention kept drifting back. Then, one morning, he found the hive empty. The bees had left. He stood in the field, jar in hand, feeling foolish. The honey had been held so carefully that it was never taken. The bees had moved on. Bastian laughed quietly, not out of joy, but recognition. He cleaned the hive and left it open. In time, another swarm found it. The honey was ordinary. It was enough. Holding something too tightly can make us miss it entirely. As the night deepens, these lessons are not lessons anymore. They are just movements. Hands open, hands close, then open again. There was also a woman named Mireia who sang in a small hall by the river. Her voice was clear, but what people remembered most was the way she paused between lines. Those pauses felt like listening. As she grew older, her voice lost some of its range. High notes became unreliable. She adjusted her songs, choosing lower keys, simpler melodies. One evening, during a familiar song, her voice cracked. The sound startled her. The audience waited. Mireia felt heat rise in her face. She could push through. She had done so before. Instead, she stopped. The silence filled the hall. Then Mireia began again, speaking the words instead of singing them. The rhythm remained. The meaning remained. Some people cried. Others simply listened. After that night, Mireia spoke her songs more often than she sang them. She had not lost her voice. She had released her attachment to how it should sound. In time, she stopped performing altogether. She sat by the river and listened to others. Her songs continued in different mouths. Letting go is not the end of expression. It is the end of insisting on one form. The night accepts all of this without commentary. You may feel yourself drifting closer to sleep now, or you may still be following the thread of each life. There is no wrong way to be here. Stories do not mind being forgotten. They are not kept alive by memory alone. They live by passing through. As we remain together in this quiet span of time, you may notice that holding requires effort, but releasing does not. Releasing is what happens when effort tires. The shop closes, the hive hums, the river moves on, and somewhere within us, without instruction, something loosens. Not because it must, but because it can. The night is wide enough to hold whatever remains. The night keeps its rhythm. Nothing needs to be added to it. Nothing needs to be taken away. In a small inland village where the wind moved slowly through tall grass, there lived a man named Calder. He was a keeper of paths. The village was old, and its paths had formed long before Calder was born. Some were wide and clear, used daily. Others were narrow, half forgotten, leading to places few people visited anymore. Calder's work was to walk them. Each morning, he chose a path and followed it from one end to the other. He cut back plants that crept too far. He moved stones that had fallen into the way. He did not try to improve the paths, only to keep them passable. Calder liked knowing where each path went. He liked the feeling of connection it gave him, as if he were holding the village together by walking its lines. There was one path he favored above all others. It led to an abandoned watchtower on a low hill. No one used the tower now. The stones were cracked. The roof had collapsed years ago. Still, Calder walked the path often, keeping it clear. He told himself it was good practice, that if the path disappeared, something would be lost. Over time, Calder began to feel responsible for the path in a deeper way. When storms came, he worried about fallen branches. When grasses grew thick, he hurried to cut them back. No one had asked him to do this. No one noticed. One day, while clearing the path after heavy rain, Calder slipped and injured his leg. It was not severe, but it made walking painful. For the first time in many years, Calder stayed home. Days passed, then weeks. From his window, Calder could see the hill where the watchtower stood. He imagined the path slowly closing, grass rising, stones shifting. He felt uneasy. A neighbor named Thera came to check on him. She brought soup and sat quietly while Calder ate. "I should be out there," Calder said, gesturing toward the hill. Thera nodded. "Yes," she said. "And you are here." Calder frowned. "If I don't walk the path, it will disappear." Thera stirred the soup. "Paths disappear all the time," she said. "Then they appear again somewhere else." Calder did not reply. When his leg healed enough to walk, Calder went to the hill. The path was still there, though narrower. Plants brushed his legs. The tower stood as it always had. Nothing essential had been lost. Calder felt something shift. He realized that the path did not need him in the way he had believed. It did not need constant holding. It could rest. From then on, Calder walked the path less often, and when it grew over again years later, he let it be. The tower remained. The hill remained. Letting go, sometimes, is letting things return to their own pace. In a city further away, where streets were busy and days were loud, there lived a woman named Selma. She worked as a clock repairer. Her shop was small and quiet, filled with ticking. Clocks of all kinds lined the walls. Some were ornate, others plain. Each kept time in its own way. Selma loved the moment when a clock resumed ticking after repair. It felt like a small return. She was precise in her work. She took pride in restoring accuracy. At home, Selma kept one clock that did not work. It was a simple wall clock that had belonged to her sister. It had stopped years ago, and Selma had never repaired it. She told herself she would, someday. But the clock stayed silent. Whenever Selma noticed it, she felt a small tension. Time, after all, was her work. This clock defied her. One night, unable to sleep, Selma took the clock down and opened it. She examined the mechanism. The problem was obvious. A simple fix. She paused. If she repaired the clock, it would begin marking time again. It would tick through nights and days. It would move forward, away from the moment when her sister had last touched it. Selma closed the clock without fixing it. The next morning, she carried it to the shop and placed it on a shelf among the others. She did not mark it as broken. She let it sit. A customer noticed it later that day. "That one doesn't tick," the customer said. "No," Selma replied. "But it belongs here," the customer said. Selma smiled. Over time, Selma noticed that she no longer felt tension when she saw the silent clock. It had joined the flow of her work without needing to function. Letting go is not always about removal. Sometimes it is about releasing expectations. In a farming community where the soil was rich and dark, there lived a man named Pavel. He grew apples. His orchard was large. The trees were old. Some produced abundantly. Others struggled. Pavel walked among them daily, checking branches, thinning fruit, watching for signs of disease. He cared deeply for the orchard. There was one tree that produced apples of exceptional sweetness. Pavel favored it. He pruned it carefully. He watered it during dry spells. He protected it from frost. The tree thrived, but Pavel's attention narrowed. He spent less time with the other trees. One year, a blight spread through the orchard. The favored tree was hit first. Despite Pavel's efforts, it died. Pavel felt a deep loss. He had invested so much care. But as the season continued, he noticed that the other trees, less tended, produced well. The orchard balanced itself. Pavel learned to distribute his care more evenly. He stopped favoring one tree over the whole. Letting go can mean letting go of preference. As the night deepens, the details soften. Names blur. Stories overlap. This is not a problem. Stories, like leaves, do not need to be kept intact to nourish the ground. There was a teacher named Annika who taught children to read. She loved seeing the moment when letters became words, when meaning arrived. She taught the same lessons year after year. Over time, she began to repeat herself without noticing. Her words grew automatic. One day, a child asked a question she could not answer easily. Annika felt unsettled. She realized she had been holding on to her knowledge instead of meeting the moment. She began listening more, letting the lessons change. Teaching became less certain, more alive. Letting go of mastery allowed learning to continue. The night holds all of these moments without judgment. You may be holding on to the thread of the story. You may be letting it slip. Both are natural. As time passes, effort fades. Attention softens. The words become less distinct. Letting go happens here too. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be resolved. The path grows quiet. The clock rests. The orchard breathes. And the night continues, steady and wide, carrying everything we release. The night keeps offering itself, moment after moment. It does not ask whether we are paying attention. It simply remains. In a village surrounded by low hills, there lived a woman named Yara who gathered water. Her village had many wells, but Yara preferred one that lay slightly farther from her home. The path to it curved gently past old trees and a field where grasses leaned together in the wind. She had walked this path for many years, carrying 2 clay vessels balanced on a wooden yoke across her shoulders. At first, the walk had felt long. Later, it became familiar. Eventually, it felt necessary. Yara timed her days by that walk. morning water, evening water. The weight of the vessels told her how much she carried. The sound of water sloshing reminded her to walk steadily. She liked knowing exactly how much effort the journey required. One season, after heavy rains, a new spring appeared closer to the village. It was shallow but clear, and people began using it immediately. It saved time. It saved energy. Yara noticed, but she did not change her habit. "This one is better," she said when asked, gesturing toward the distant well. No one argued, but slowly, fewer people walked that path. The grass grew taller. The trees leaned farther inward. Yara continued, stepping carefully through the narrowing trail. One morning, she stumbled. The yoke slipped. One vessel cracked and leaked, water darkening the earth. Yara stood still, heart beating faster than the spill required. She felt anger first, at the stone, at the grass, at herself. Then she felt something else, a recognition she had been avoiding. The closer spring had been enough. The longer path had become a way of holding the past. That day, Yara filled her remaining vessel at the nearer spring. The water tasted the same. The old path faded over time. Yara did not walk it again. The well remained, quiet and full. Nothing had been lost. Letting go can feel like shortening a journey we believed gave us meaning. But sometimes, the meaning was in the walking itself, not the distance. Far away, in a region where winter stayed long and summers were brief, there lived a man named Ilya who carved wood. He carved bowls, spoons, small figures. His hands were strong, his movements precise. He sold his work at a modest price and kept little for himself. There was one piece he had never finished. It was a small figure carved from a piece of driftwood he had found years earlier. The wood was unusual, its grain twisting in unexpected ways. Each time Ilya tried to carve it, his knife caught. The shape resisted his intention, so he set it aside. From time to time, he picked it up again, turning it in his hands, imagining what it could become. Each time, he returned it to the shelf. The unfinished piece began to feel heavy, not in weight, but in presence. It watched him work. It reminded him of what he could not complete. One winter, Ilya's hands stiffened. Carving became slower, more painful. He adapted, choosing simpler forms. The unfinished piece remained. One evening, as the light faded early, Ilya took the driftwood outside. he placed it near the fire he used for warmth. The fire caught slowly. The wood darkened, then cracked, then burned. Ilya felt a tightening, then a release. The piece had been asking not to be finished, but to be freed. After that, Ilya carved less. He rested more. His work changed. It became simpler, rougher, quieter. Letting go sometimes means accepting that not everything wants to become what we imagine. As the night moves forward, the stories do not pile up. They thin. They stretch out. In a crowded town where voices overlapped constantly, there lived a woman named Corin who listened for silence. She worked as a clerk, writing records by hand. Her days were full of names, numbers, dates. At night, she returned to a small room above a bakery. Corin believed silence was something to be found, if one looked hard enough. She sought it in early mornings, late nights, forgotten corners. But the town grew louder. New buildings rose. More people arrived. Silence became rare. Corin felt frustrated. She had been searching for something that no longer existed. One night, unable to sleep, she noticed the bakery below had gone quiet. The ovens were cooling. The day's noise had settled into a soft hum. It was not silence, but it was enough. Corin realized she had been holding a rigid idea of what she needed. Letting go of that idea allowed her to rest. Silence does not always come in pure form. Sometimes it comes disguised as acceptance. In a place where the land flattened into open sky, there lived a man named Rowan who watched clouds. He lay on his back in the fields, naming shapes as they formed and dissolved. He told himself he was learning impermanence. But secretly, he hoped to see one shape linger longer than the others. It never did. One afternoon, after watching clouds for hours, Rowan felt bored. The boredom surprised him. He stood up and walked home. He did not watch clouds again for many years. When he eventually did, it was without expectation. Letting go can also mean letting go of the practice itself. As the night deepens, these stories may begin to blur into one another. That is natural. There was a woman named Petra who kept lists of tasks, lists of thoughts, lists of things to remember. She believed lists kept life orderly. One day, she lost a list. She searched everywhere. The anxiety rose quickly. Then, she noticed something unexpected. The day continued. The tasks were remembered, or they were not. Nothing collapsed. Petra began writing fewer lists. order remained. Letting go often reveals that what we feared losing was never fully in our control. There was a man named Lucio who trained dogs. He believed firmly in consistency. Same commands, same timing, same expectations. One dog, however, never responded as expected. No matter how consistent Lucio was, the dog hesitated, tilted its head, waited. Lucio grew frustrated. Eventually, he stopped insisting. He adjusted his tone. He waited. The dog responded. Letting go of control allowed communication. The night holds these moments without preference. Some stories linger, others pass unnoticed. There is no need to sort them. As time passes, effort becomes unnecessary. Attention loosens on its own. Letting go is not something we accomplish. It is something that happens when we stop insisting. You may notice your own thoughts thinning now, or drifting, or disappearing altogether. That is not something to manage. The night is doing its work. The path shortens. The fire fades. The water settles. And whatever you were holding, tightly or gently, can rest now. There is nothing to carry forward. The night is wide enough. The night continues without marking its place. It does not pause to ask where we are in the story. It simply moves, and we move with it, or we do not. In a small valley where fog often settled in the early hours, there lived a man named Leandro who tuned instruments. People brought him violins, flutes, and old lutes whose strings had lost their clarity. Leandro listened carefully before touching anything. He believed the instrument told him what it needed. If he waited long enough, his workshop was quiet. Sound arrived one note at a time. Leandro's hands were steady, but his ears were his true tools. He could hear tension where others heard noise. He could hear when a string was held too tight, when wood wanted to rest. There was one instrument he had kept for himself. It was a violin, worn smooth by years of use. It had belonged to his brother, who had played it every evening until his hands could no longer manage the strings. When his brother died, the violin came to Leandro. Leandro tuned it often. He polished it. He adjusted it carefully, but he never played it. He told himself he was not a player. He was a tuner. That was enough. Still, the violin remained on a stand in the center of the room, as if waiting. Sometimes, late at night, Leandro would draw the bow across a single string, just one note. Then he would stop. The note lingered longer than he expected. One morning, a young woman named Iskra came with a cracked violin. She watched Leandro work with quiet attention. "You have one of your own," she said, nodding toward the stand. "Yes," Leandro replied. "Why don't you play it?" she asked. Leandro smiled faintly. "It is already full," he said. Iskra did not press. After she left, Leandro thought about that word, full. The violin was full of memory, of evenings past, of his brother's presence, perhaps too full to receive anything new. That night, Leandro took the violin outside. The fog was thick, dampening sound. He stood alone and played a simple melody his brother used to practice. The notes wavered. His fingers were uncertain, but the sound carried into the fog and disappeared. When he finished, Leandro felt tired and lighter. The next day, he gave the violin to Iskra. "It will sound different in your hands," he said. Iskra accepted it carefully. Leandro's workshop felt quieter after that. Not emptier, quieter. Letting go sometimes allows sound to travel where it could not before. In a coastal village where tides shaped the days, there lived a woman named Malin who mended nets. Her work was repetitive, knot by knot, tear by tear. She sat near the shore, watching boats come and go. Malin had learned this work from her uncle. He had taught her how to see where a net would fail before it did, how to mend it in a way that did not fight the weave. She was good at it. One year, fishing became poor. Boats returned with light catches. Nets came back more damaged, strained by longer journeys. Malin worked longer hours. Her hands ached. She took pride in keeping the nets usable. But she began to notice resentment rising quietly. The fishermen depended on her work, yet the sea no longer gave as it once had. One evening, as she mended a particularly torn net, Malin paused. She realized she was trying to hold together something that was already changing. The sea was shifting. The fish were moving. The nets were not the problem. The next day, Malin told the fishermen she would mend fewer nets. She would work fewer hours. Some were upset. Some understood. Malin spent more time walking the shore, watching tides, listening. The nets were mended as needed, not more. Letting go sometimes means letting systems change, even when we know how to keep them running. Further inland, where roads intersected without clear order, there lived a man named Dario who collected maps. Old maps, new maps, maps that contradicted one another. He loved how maps tried to capture movement with stillness, how they promised clarity, even when reality resisted. Dario spent evenings comparing them, tracing routes that no longer existed. One map in particular fascinated him. It showed a road that led to a village no one remembered. Dario searched for references. He asked elders. No one knew the place. He held onto the map, convinced it pointed to something lost. One summer, Dario decided to follow the road as best he could. He walked for days, guided by the fading lines. The road narrowed, then vanished into forest. Dario stood there, map in hand, uncertain. He realized then that the map had already given him what it could. The walking had ended. He turned back. At home, Dario stored the map with the others, no longer special. Letting go can mean accepting that guidance ends before certainty does. In a town built around a long market street, there lived a woman named Evelys, who arranged flowers. Her arrangements were known for their balance. Nothing stood out too much. Colors softened each other. She believed harmony came from restraint. One day, a customer asked for something different, something wild. They said. Evelys hesitated, then agreed. She chose flowers she would normally avoid. Bright, uneven, almost clashing. She arranged them quickly, without adjusting. The result surprised her. It was alive in a way her usual work was not. After that, Evelys allowed more disorder into her arrangements. Some failed, some did not. Letting go of control invited risk, and with it, vitality. In a quiet neighborhood near a school, there lived a man named Tommaso who fixed shoes. People came to him with worn soles and broken straps. Tommaso repaired what he could, often making shoes last far longer than expected. He took pride in extending usefulness. One day, a child came with shoes worn completely through. Tommaso examined them and shook his head. "These have finished," he said. The child looked upset. Tommaso softened. "That is not a bad thing," he added. They did their walking. He gave the child a small leather token instead, cut from the same material. The child smiled. Letting go includes honoring what has been used fully. As the night continues, these stories may no longer feel separate. They begin to echo one another, like variations on a single theme. Hands releasing instruments, nets loosening, maps folding away. There was a woman named Kaya who kept birds. She raised them carefully, feeding them by hand until they could fly. Each release felt different. Some birds left immediately. Some lingered. Kaya learned not to follow them with her eyes for too long. She trusted the air to take them. Letting go is an act of trust in what we cannot accompany. There was a man named Nilo who wrote letters he never sent. He wrote to people he no longer spoke to, then burned the letters. The writing was enough. Letting go does not require an audience. As the night deepens further, effort fades even more. The words become softer, less insistent. You may find that you are no longer holding on to the stories, but floating alongside them. This is not something to manage. The mind loosens as the hands have loosened in all these lives. Nothing needs to be finished tonight. The instrument rests. The net drifts. The map folds itself. And somewhere within, without instruction, the holding eases again. The night continues to carry everything gently onward. The night does not ask us to keep up with it. It moves at its own pace, steady and forgiving. We can let ourselves be carried. In a place where the land rose gently toward distant mountains, there lived a woman named Tamsin who kept a small inn. Travelers stopped there on their way through, staying a night or two before continuing on. Tamsin welcomed them all in the same way. A quiet greeting, a clean room, a simple meal. She did not ask where they were going unless they offered it first. Over the years, she noticed patterns. Some guests arrived weary and grateful. Others arrived restless, eager to leave before they had even settled. A few stayed longer than expected, unsure when to move on. Tamsin learned not to become attached to any of them, or so she believed. There was one guest, a man named Orfeo, who stayed for an entire season. He had arrived with an injury, walking slowly with a cane. He told Tamsin he would leave when he could walk without pain. They spoke often in the evenings. Orfeo had a gentle way of noticing small things, the way light shifted across the table, the sound of wind around the eaves. Tamsin found herself lingering after clearing dishes. When Orfeo finally walked without the cane, he thanked her and prepared to leave. Tamsin felt a tightening she had not expected. She had told herself she was used to people coming and going, but this departure felt different. On the morning Orfeo left, Tamsin handed him his pack and wished him well. He smiled, bowed slightly, and walked down the road. She watched until he disappeared. For days afterward, the inn felt quieter, not empty, just changed. Tamsin noticed that she had been holding Orfeo's presence as something stable, something that made her evenings fuller. Letting go of that had not been part of her plan. But as time passed, other guests arrived. Different voices, different silences. Tamsin realized then that her work was not to hold anyone, but to offer space while they passed through. The inn returned to its rhythm. Letting go, sometimes, is remembering the nature of what we tend. In a town where the river split into many channels, there lived a man named Jovan who built small boats, not fishing boats, but narrow ones meant for crossing the water between close banks. He built them simply, knowing they would not last long. The water was hard on wood, and the crossings were frequent. Jovan believed usefulness did not require permanence. There was one boat, however, that lasted longer than the others. Its wood was strong, its balance perfect. People asked Jovan why he did not keep it for himself. He considered it. The boat became familiar. He watched it cross the channels again and again. He felt a quiet pride. Then one day, the river flooded. The channels merged. The boat was carried away, lost in the widening water. Jovan felt a brief sadness, then acceptance. He built another. Letting go can be easier when we do not ask things to last beyond their nature. In a hillside village, where stone walls divided small plots of land, there lived a woman named Elva who kept goats. She knew each one by temperament rather than appearance. Some goats wandered far. Some stayed close. Elva allowed this, trusting their instincts. There was one goat she worried over constantly. It lagged behind. It hesitated near slopes. Elva guided it carefully, keeping it from risk. One day, distracted, Elva lost sight of the goat. She searched frantically, calling out. She found it later, standing confidently on a ledge she would have never guided it to. Elva laughed softly. Her worry had been holding the goat back. Letting go can allow growth we did not expect. In a quiet study filled with dust and light, there lived a man named Corvin who copied old texts by hand. He did this not to preserve them perfectly, but to understand them. He worked slowly, line by line. There was one text he returned to often, trying to capture it exactly. Each time, he found a new error in his earlier copies. The text never settled. One day, Corvin stopped trying to perfect it. He copied it once more, then closed the book. He felt relief. The text had already taught him what it could. Letting go includes letting understanding be incomplete. As the night deepens further, the space between stories grows. Words arrive more slowly. Meanings soften. In a port city where ships arrived from distant places, there lived a woman named Lise who tied knots. She worked on the docks, securing cargo before departure. She knew many knots, each suited to a different purpose. She prided herself on precision. One evening, a ship was delayed. Cargo waited. Lise retied a knot several times, dissatisfied. Finally, an older worker named Bram said, "It will hold." Lise hesitated, then stepped back. The ship departed safely. Lise realized she had been tying not for strength, but for reassurance. Letting go of unnecessary certainty allowed the work to move on. In a forest village where paths twisted unpredictably, there lived a man named Aaron who guided travelers. He memorized routes, landmarks, turns that were easy to miss. Over time, he began guiding the same paths repeatedly. He stopped noticing the forest itself. One day, a traveler asked a question Aaron could not answer. A small detail, a fallen tree, a new stream. Aaron realized the forest had changed while he held onto old knowledge. He began walking alone again, relearning. Letting go of familiarity can reopen attention. In a sunlit courtyard where vines climbed old walls, there lived a woman named Nomi who taught children to dance. She taught them steps carefully, insisting on form. One child struggled, always moving slightly off rhythm. Eventually, Nomi stopped correcting her. The child's movements became expressive, alive. Nomi adjusted her teaching. Letting go of strict form made room for joy. As the night carries us onward, these lives settle like stones in water, each sending out small ripples. You may no longer be following each one. That is all right. The mind knows when to loosen. In a narrow apartment above a tailor's shop, there lived a man named Silas who repaired umbrellas. He worked mostly in silence, stitching fabric torn by sudden storms. He liked returning umbrellas to usefulness. One umbrella, however, had been repaired too many times. The fabric was thin, the frame bent. Silas told the owner it was finished. The owner hesitated, then nodded. Silas watched the owner leave without it. Sometimes, letting go is acknowledging when repair is no longer kindness. In a rural town where bells marked the hours, there lived a woman named Olya who kept time for the town hall. She wound the clock each morning. One day, she forgot. The clock stopped. The town continued. Olya smiled. Letting go reveals what truly depends on us and what does not. As the night deepens even more, the stories begin to feel less like stories and more like passing thoughts. They do not ask to be held. You may feel yourself drifting now, thoughts thinning, attention loosening. This is not something to guide. The night is already doing the work. The inn quiets. The boat drifts. The path grows over. And whatever you have been holding an image, a worry, a sense of yourself can rest for a while. There is no need to keep watch. The night is wide, and it holds everything gently, even when we let go. The night does not notice how long it has been speaking. It does not count the stories. It simply keeps its gentle pace. And we can keep ours. In a wide basin where the land dipped slightly and gathered rain, there lived a man named Ivar who repaired roofs. He moved from house to house with a small ladder, a bundle of tools, and a practiced eye. He had learned early how to find leaks, a dark stain, a softened beam, a place where water paused too long. His work was careful, often unseen, and usually appreciated only when it failed. Ivar liked that. He believed good work did not call attention to itself. There was one house he returned to often, owned by an elderly woman named Kezia. Her roof was old, patched many times. Each year, a new problem appeared. Ivar fixed it without complaint. One autumn, after a particularly heavy storm, Ivar climbed onto Kezia's roof and saw that the damage was too extensive. The wood beneath the tiles had rotted in several places. Repair would only delay the inevitable. When Kezia came outside, Ivar told her gently, "It can be patched again," he said, "but it will not last." Kezia nodded. "Then let it end," she said. Ivar was surprised. He had expected worry, negotiation, reluctance. "You are not afraid?" he asked. Kezia smiled. "This roof has done its work," she said. "So have I." The house was rebuilt the following spring. Ivar helped dismantle the old roof. As the beams came down, he felt a strange tenderness. He had known that roof well, but he also felt relief. Letting go can mean allowing things to finish with dignity. In a market town, where voices rose and fell throughout the day, there lived a woman named Salome who sold cloth. Her stall was small, but her fabrics were chosen carefully. She favored simple weaves, soft colors. Customers often lingered, touching the cloth, asking questions. Salome answered patiently. She kept one piece of cloth behind her stall, folded carefully. It was finer than the rest, dyed a deep blue that caught the light in subtle ways. She had planned to make something from it, though she was never sure what. Years passed. The cloth remained folded, Sometimes, Salome unfolded it, ran her hands across it, then folded it again. The cloth never became anything. One day, a young woman named Renata came to the stall looking for fabric for a wedding garment. She wanted something simple, something that felt calm. Salome hesitated, then brought out the blue cloth. Renata's eyes softened when she saw it. Salome sold it without bargaining. That evening, her stall felt strangely lighter. She realized she had been keeping the cloth as a promise to herself. Letting it go allowed it to become what it was meant to be. In a place where wind shaped the dunes endlessly, there lived a man named Oscar who studied patterns in sand. He watched how ridges formed and dissolved, how footprints disappeared. He sketched what he saw, trying to capture the shapes before they changed. Over time, Oscar grew frustrated. The patterns never stayed. His sketches felt inadequate. One afternoon, he stopped drawing. He simply watched. The frustration eased. Oscar understood then that the patterns were not meant to be kept. They were meant to be witnessed. Letting go of recording allowed presence. In a quiet suburb where evenings settled early, there lived a woman named Danica who arranged family photographs in albums. She labeled each one carefully, writing names and dates. She had albums for every stage of her life: childhood, early work, marriage, loss. She kept them neatly on a shelf. One evening, looking through them, Danica noticed how much effort she had put into preserving sequence, making sure everything followed the correct order. But memory did not work that way. Moments overlapped, feelings resurfaced out of place. She removed the photographs from one album and mixed them gently. She created a new book without dates, without labels. The images spoke differently now. Letting go of order allowed memory to breathe. In a farming village where fields stretched wide, there lived a man named Peter who raised horses. He trained them carefully, teaching them to respond to subtle cues. He believed in control through trust. There was one horse he struggled with. No matter how patiently Peter worked, the horse resisted direction. It was strong, alert, unwilling to submit. Peter persisted. One day, exhausted, Peter loosened the reins and simply rode with the horse, allowing it to choose the path. The horse relaxed. Over time, they found a rhythm. Letting go of dominance allowed partnership. In a city apartment where light filtered through tall windows, there lived a woman named Isolde who restored old paintings. She cleaned away grime, repaired cracks, returned color. She loved revealing what had been hidden. One painting troubled her. Beneath layers of dirt, there were marks she could not identify. She cleaned carefully, but the image beneath remained unclear. Finally, she stopped. She realized the marks were part of the painting's history, not flaws to be removed. Letting go of perfection preserved truth. In a mountain village where paths climbed steeply, there lived a man named Rurik who carried supplies for others. He was strong, reliable, always willing. People depended on him. Over time, Rurik felt proud of this. Being needed gave his days shape. One winter, Rurik fell ill. Others carried supplies in his place. The village adapted. When Rurik recovered, he felt displaced. Then he noticed something unexpected. Without carrying so much, he noticed the mountains again, the sky, his own breath. He still helped when needed, but he no longer defined himself by it. Letting go of indispensability allowed rest. In a town with a small library, there lived a woman named Evelyn who returned books late. She read slowly, savoring each one, reluctant to let them go. The librarian never scolded her. He simply smiled. One day, Evelyn returned a book on time. She felt oddly proud. She realized that holding books too long kept others from reading them. Letting go allowed circulation. In a narrow valley where echoes lingered, there lived a man named Corin who shouted into the hills to hear his voice return. He enjoyed the certainty of response. One day, the echo did not come back as expected. Wind shifted, sound scattered. Corin felt unsettled. Then he laughed. The hills did not owe him his own voice. Letting go of expectation allowed surprise. As the night continues, the stories grow quieter, less distinct. They begin to feel like passing impressions rather than narratives. This is natural. In a coastal cottage where waves sounded constantly, there lived a woman named Brisa who collected shells. She arranged them by size, color, shape. Her collection filled shelves. One morning, she realized she had stopped walking the beach. She was busy arranging what she had already taken. She returned many shells to the shore. The shelves emptied. The walks returned. Letting go made room for experience. In a town square where a fountain flowed steadily, there lived a man named Alden who counted coins tossed into the water. He believed counting gave the fountain meaning. One day, the coins were gone, taken for cleaning. The fountain still flowed. Alden stopped counting. The sound was enough. As the night deepens further, you may notice the stories blending, becoming less important than the tone they leave behind. That is how it is meant to be. Letting go does not always arrive with insight. Often it arrives as softness, as a quiet easing of effort. You may feel yourself drifting now, or you may simply feel less inclined to follow each word. There is no need to decide. The night is steady. It carries these stories the way water carries reflections briefly, without holding. And whatever you have been gripping, whether tightly or without noticing, can loosen a little more now. Nothing needs to be done. The night remains, wide and patient, holding everything that has been released and everything that has not yet been noticed. The night no longer feels like a place we are entering. It feels like something already around us. It has been here all along. In a small harbor town where lanterns were lit at dusk, there lived a man named Amon who painted signs. Not large ones, not decorative ones, simple signs, names of shops, directions, warnings about shallow water. Amon believed a good sign should be clear and then forgotten. He worked slowly, choosing words carefully. He preferred signs that told only what was necessary. Too many words, he felt, made people stop listening. There was one sign he never finished. It was meant for his own workshop. He had painted the letters neatly, but never hung it. The sign leaned against the wall, facing inward, as if it were still deciding. Amon told himself he would hang it when the work felt complete. Years passed. People found his workshop without the sign. Word spread. The sign remained leaning. One evening, as Amon cleaned his brushes, he noticed how faded the unfinished sign had become. The paint had dulled. The wood had warped slightly. He realized then that the sign had already done its work. It had given him the feeling of preparation, of something waiting to be revealed. But the waiting had become the holding. The next morning, Amon placed the sign outside without adjusting it. The letters were imperfect, the edges rough. It was enough. Letting go often looks like allowing something to be imperfect and present at the same time. In a farming settlement near a bend in the river, there lived a woman named Milena who baked bread. Her loaves were known for their consistency. Same shape, same texture, same warmth. She took pride in this. Each morning, she measured carefully. Each loaf was shaped with precision. People relied on her bread to be familiar. One day, her scales broke. Milena baked anyway, estimating by feel, The loaves came out uneven, some larger, some smaller. She worried how people would react. They ate the bread happily. Milena felt something ease. She continued baking without the scales. Letting go of exactness did not ruin the work. It revealed its resilience. In a hillside town where stone steps wound upward between homes, there lived a man named Iosef who repaired stairs. He replaced worn stones, stabilized loose edges. He believed steps should be safe above all else. There was one stairway he checked daily. It led to an old lookout where few people went anymore. The steps were uneven, the stones ancient. Yosef repaired them often, though no one had asked him to. One day, an older woman named Rena watched him work. "Why do you keep fixing these?" she asked. Yosef paused. "Because they are here," he said. Rena smiled. "They were here before you," she said. "They will be here after." Yosef looked at the steps differently then. He stopped repairing them so frequently. He let the wear show. People still climbed them, carefully. Letting go does not always mean removing danger. Sometimes it means trusting attention. In a quiet district where evening light lingered softly, there lived a woman named Celeste who kept a window open year-round. She liked the air moving through her home, even in winter. Friends told her it was impractical. Celeste nodded and kept the window open. One winter, the latch broke. The window could not be closed fully. Celeste noticed the cold more sharply. She wrapped herself in blankets. She considered repairing the latch. Instead, she closed the window and left it closed. The air inside felt still at first, then calm. Celeste realized she had been holding on to an idea of herself, someone who always kept the window open. Letting go allowed her to choose again. In a mountain pass where travelers rested briefly before continuing, there lived a man named Jarek who kept a fire burning. He added wood when needed, watched the flames. Travelers gathered, warmed themselves, then moved on. Jarek enjoyed tending the fire. He liked its predictability. One night, exhausted, he fell asleep without adding wood. The fire burned down to embers. When he woke, the pass was quiet. No one complained. Someone else had started a new fire nearby. Jarek felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. The fire did not depend on him alone. Letting go of responsibility allowed shared care. In a coastal cliff village where the sea met stone, there lived a woman named Nessa who collected driftwood. She shaped pieces into small stools and tables. Each piece of wood had traveled far. Nessa liked imagining its journey. She kept one piece aside unusual and smooth, waiting for the right use. Years passed. The piece remained unused. One stormy day, the sea surged higher than usual. Waves reached her workshop. The piece of driftwood was swept away. Nessa watched it disappear into the water. She felt sadness, then acceptance. The wood had more traveling to do. Letting go honors the movement that brought things to us in the first place. In a quiet valley, where bells rang faintly from distant villages, there lived a man named Thomas who listened for them each evening. He told time by their sound. As years passed, some bells stopped ringing. Villages changed. Thomas noticed the silence left behind. At first, he felt loss. Then he noticed other sounds. Wind, birds, his own breathing. Time did not stop. Letting go of markers allows time to be felt differently. In a town built along a canal, there lived a woman named Lydia who cleaned windows. She took pride in clarity. She cleaned the same windows week after week. The reflections pleased her. One day, she skipped a window, then another. She noticed nothing terrible happened. She began cleaning fewer windows. The town still reflected itself. Letting go can be a matter of reducing effort until only what matters remains. In a small studio filled with clay dust, there lived a man named Boren who taught pottery to beginners. He showed them how to center the clay, how to feel its movement. Some students struggled. Boren corrected them gently at first, then more firmly. One evening, watching a student wrestle with the clay, Boren stopped correcting. He watched instead. The student found their own balance. Boren learned to speak less. Letting go of instruction allowed discovery. In a garden surrounded by low walls, there lived a woman named Alara who pruned roses. She knew when to cut, how much to remove. She believed pruning helped growth. One season, she pruned less. She allowed the roses to grow wild. The garden changed, less controlled, more alive. Alara smiled. Letting go of shaping allowed form to emerge. As the night deepens further, even these stories begin to feel unnecessary. The mind may take only their softness, leaving the details behind. This is not loss. It is how listening becomes rest. There was a man named Savel who watched the moon each night from his doorstep. He believed it grounded him. One cloudy night, the moon did not appear. Savel felt uneasy. Then he noticed the darkness itself. He sat with it. Letting go of light allowed him to see differently. In a narrow alley where echoes repeated footsteps, there lived a woman named Irina who walked quickly, always focused ahead. One evening, she slowed. Nothing bad happened. She continued walking slowly. Letting go of urgency revealed space. In a house near the edge of town, there lived a man named Felix who kept a clock that chimed every hour. He listened to it faithfully. One night, the clock stopped chiming. Felix noticed, then slept. The night did not collapse. Letting go of timekeeping allowed sleep. As we remain here together, the night has done much of the work already. Words have thinned. Stories have softened. You may no longer be following the flow in any deliberate way. That is natural. Letting go does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, like fatigue, like ease. The sign hangs imperfectly. The bread rises unevenly. The fire burns without tending. And whatever you have been holding, ideas, stories, even the act of listening can loosen now. There is nothing left to carry. The night is wide, steady, and patient. It will remain, whether we are here with it or already resting somewhere else. The night has settled into itself now. It does not lean forward. It does not wait for what comes next. In a small desert town where evenings cooled quickly after long days of heat, there lived a man named Samir who repaired wells. He knew how to listen for water beneath stone, how to judge when digging should stop. People trusted Samir because he did not promise more than the ground could give. There was one well he returned to often. It had been dug many years ago, and its water level had dropped steadily. Each time Samir repaired its lining, the water returned briefly, then receded again. The owners asked him to deepen it. Samir considered the land. He considered the signs. He shook his head. "The water is moving away," he said. "This well has followed it as far as it can." They asked him again the following year. He gave the same answer. Eventually, they stopped asking. The well dried completely. People found water elsewhere. Samir passed by the old well sometimes, noticing how still it had become. It no longer demanded effort. Letting go can be listening when persistence becomes refusal. In a coastal village where fog rolled in without warning, there lived a woman named Mirel, who rang a bell each evening to guide boats toward the harbor. She had done this for many years, timing the bell by feel rather than clock. She knew when the sound should carry farther. She knew when to pause. One night, the fog was unusually thick. Mirel rang the bell again and again, her arm tired. The sound seemed swallowed. Finally, she stopped. boats found their way in regardless. The harbor lights glowed faintly. The bell had not been the only guide. Mirelle felt both unnecessary and relieved. She rang the bell less often after that, trusting the fog to thin when it would. Letting go of certainty allowed shared navigation. In a narrow street where balconies nearly touched, there lived a man named Paolo who tuned radios. He adjusted dials carefully, finding clear signals amid static. He enjoyed bringing clarity to noise. At home, Paolo kept one radio always tuned to a station that no longer broadcast. He told himself he liked the quiet between signals. But sometimes, late at night, he found himself listening for something that would never return. One evening, he turned the dial fully to silence. He switched the radio off. The room felt calmer. Letting go of waiting allowed rest. In a village surrounded by orchards, there lived a woman named Ardis who dried fruit in the sun. She arranged slices carefully on trays, turning them at just the right moment. She believed timing mattered. One season, clouds came unexpectedly. Rain fell on the drying fruit. Much of it spoiled. Ardis felt disappointed, but she did not rush to replace it. She adjusted her work, drying smaller batches, accepting loss. The fruit that remained tasted just as sweet. Letting go includes accepting that not everything will be saved. In a town near a railway junction, there lived a man named Benoit who watched trains. He had done this since childhood, memorizing schedules, recognizing engines by sound. He liked knowing when things would arrive and depart. Over time, the schedules changed. New trains arrived. Old ones stopped running. Benoit kept the old schedules, comparing them to the new ones, noticing discrepancies. One day, he folded the old papers and set them aside. He watched trains without knowing their numbers. The watching became simpler. Letting go of prediction allowed presence. In a forest settlement where light filtered unevenly through tall trees, there lived a woman named Kyle who gathered mushrooms. She knew which ones were safe, which to avoid. She taught others carefully, warning them not to take what they were unsure of. One year, she noticed fewer mushrooms in her usual places. The forest had changed. Instead of searching harder, Kyle explored new areas. She found different varieties. Letting go of familiarity allowed adaptation. In a quiet riverside home, there lived a man named Otis who repaired watches. He liked small mechanisms, the way tiny movements created larger rhythms. He worked patiently, There was one watch he could not fix. The parts were worn beyond replacement. Otis kept it on his bench for years, occasionally trying again. One day, he stopped. He placed the watch in a drawer and closed it. The bench felt clearer. Letting go can be choosing where to place our attention. In a small mountain town where winter arrived early, there lived a woman named Renee who knitted scarves. She gave them away freely, never keeping track. One scarf she kept. It was imperfect, the stitches uneven. She meant to fix it. Years passed. One day, she wrapped it around her neck and went outside. The scarf was warm enough. She never fixed it. Letting go of improvement allowed use. In a fishing village where tides shifted daily, there lived a man named Ianto who studied currents. He charted them carefully, noting changes. He believed understanding could prevent loss. One storm rearranged the seabed completely. His charts became useless. Ianto began again, but more loosely. He noted patterns without insisting they stay. Letting go of control allowed learning to continue. In a city park where people walked their routines, there lived a woman named Sina who fed pigeons. She came at the same time each day. One morning, she did not come. The pigeons found food elsewhere. When she returned days later, they gathered again. Sina smiled. Letting go does not always leave a lasting absence. In a workshop filled with sawdust, there lived a man named Halvor who built chairs. He believed a chair should be sturdy above all else. One chair, built especially strong, was heavy and uncomfortable. Halvor took it apart and rebuilt it lighter. Letting go of excess allowed comfort. In a monastery garden, long abandoned, there lived a woman named Thalia who tended a single plot. She did not know what had been planted before. She worked with what grew naturally. Some plants thrived, others faded. She did not interfere much. Letting go of intention allowed the garden to find its shape. As the night stretches onward, the stories no longer insist on being followed. They drift, overlapping, thinning. You may feel your attention resting more than moving. This is not something to change. Letting go does not require action. It happens when effort ceases to be necessary. The well rests. The bell quiets. The radio falls silent. In a small house at the edge of a road, there lived a man named Jonas who watched cars pass at night. He counted headlights until sleep came. One evening, he stopped counting. Sleep came anyway. Letting go of ritual allowed rest. In a valley where wind passed through tall reeds, there lived a woman named Lorne who listened for changes in sound. She could tell when weather would shift. One night, she did not listen. She slept through the storm. The house stood. Letting go includes trusting what does not require vigilance. As the night deepens further, the words may feel less like messages and more like a gentle current. They do not ask to be held. You may notice thoughts slipping away between sentences, or entire passages passing unnoticed. That is natural. The night is not testing attention. It is offering rest. Whatever remains unresolved does not need to be resolved now. Whatever feels unfinished can remain so. The sign does not need to be read. The schedule does not need to be known. The watch does not need to tick. And whatever you have been carrying quietly, habitually can ease down for a while. The night is steady enough to hold it. It always has been. The night has grown soft around the edges. It does not insist on clarity now. It allows things to blur. And that is enough. In a village where fields opened wide toward the horizon, there lived a woman named Aveline who folded paper, not for messages, not for records, but simply to fold. Cranes, boats, small boxes. She used plain paper, nothing decorative. Each fold was careful, each crease exact. Aveline believed that precision honored the paper. She folded every evening, placing the finished shapes on a low shelf. Over time, the shelf filled, then another, then the floor beside the wall. The shapes were beautiful, but the room grew crowded. Moving became difficult. Still, Aveline continued. One evening, as she folded yet another crane, the paper tore slightly at the crease. The tear was small, but unmistakable. Aveline stared at it. She felt a familiar urge rise to discard it, to begin again, to keep the shelf perfect. Instead, she finished folding. The crane stood unevenly, its wing bent awkwardly. Aveline placed it among the others. Nothing collapsed. The next day, she gathered many of the folded shapes and took them outside. She set them in the field and watched the wind move through them. Some fell over. Some were carried away. Some remained briefly, then flattened. The field looked ordinary again. Aveline returned home and folded less. Letting go sometimes means allowing beauty to be temporary. In a quiet port where ships rested between journeys, there lived a man named Roald who painted hull numbers. His work was simple and repetitive. Numbers faded. Numbers were repainted. He liked the certainty of it. There was one ship whose number he repainted more carefully than the others. It had been his father's ship once. the number mattered to him. When the ship was decommissioned, Roald felt a dull ache. The hull was stripped, the number removed. Roald stood watching, hands empty. Later, he painted numbers on new ships, different shapes, different curves. The ache faded. Letting go does not erase connection. It loosens the form it takes. In a town where rain was frequent and gentle, there lived a woman named Celia who collected rainwater in wide bowls. She placed them carefully on her roof, emptying them into jars each morning. She liked seeing how full the jars became. She liked knowing how much had fallen. One season, rain came heavier than usual. The bowls overflowed. Water spilled down the sides. Celia tried to add more bowls, more jars. Still, water spilled. Eventually, she stopped measuring. She let the rain fall where it would. Her jars were still full. Letting go of measuring allows abundance to feel simple. In a narrow valley where sound carried far, there lived a man named Hadrian who practiced speaking clearly. He rehearsed words aloud, shaping each sound carefully. He believed clarity prevented misunderstanding. One afternoon, his voice cracked. The sound surprised him. He paused, then continued speaking more softly. People still understood. Letting go of perfection allowed connection. In a lakeside village where mornings were quiet, there lived a woman named Maris who rowed her boat at dawn. She followed the same path each day, circling the lake. She liked the rhythm, the predictability. One morning, fog covered the water. She could not see her usual landmarks. She hesitated, then rowed anyway, letting the shoreline guide her. She returned safely. After that, she varied her route. Letting go of routine allowed trust. In a hillside orchard where fruit trees bloomed unevenly, there lived a man named Eric who counted blossoms. He believed the count predicted the harvest. One spring, he miscounted badly. Frost followed. The harvest was small. Eric stopped counting. He tended the trees instead. Letting go of prediction allowed care to remain. In a quiet corner of a city park, there lived a woman named Ilona who fed fish at the same hour each day. The fish gathered quickly. One day, she arrived late. The fish scattered. The next day, she arrived early. They gathered again. Ilona realized the fish did not keep time the way she did. She came when she felt like it. Letting go of schedules allowed ease. In a stone house where echoes lingered, there lived a man named Tomasz who practiced the same song on a flute each evening. he believed mastery came from repetition. Over time, the song became polished, precise. Then one night, he played a different melody, unplanned. It felt alive. He began improvising more. Letting go of repetition allowed creativity. In a coastal meadow where grass bent toward the sea, there lived a woman named Nyla who tied bundles of herbs. She arranged them carefully, matching lengths, aligning stems. She believed order preserved strength. One day, a bundle slipped from her hands and scattered. She gathered the herbs loosely. They dried just as well. Letting go of arrangement did not weaken the result. In a mountain village where shadows fell early, there lived a man named Lorcan who lit lanterns at dusk. He walked the same route, lighting each one. He took pride in not missing any. One evening, a lantern remained unlit. Lorcan noticed later, from afar. The street was still passable. He did not go back. Letting go of completeness allowed rest. In a low, quiet house near the woods, there lived a woman named Sabra who polished stones. She collected them from the river, smoothing them further by hand. She liked the shine. Over time, her hands grew sore. One day, she placed the stones back in the river. They continued smoothing themselves. Letting go of effort allowed natural processes to continue. In a village where paths crossed without signs, there lived a man named Quirin who gave directions. He prided himself on accuracy. One traveler ignored his advice and still arrived safely. Quirin laughed. Letting go of being right allowed humility. In a courtyard shaded by vines, there lived a woman named Orla who watered plants each morning. She believed consistency was kindness. One morning, she forgot. The plants survived. She forgot again, occasionally. The plants adapted. Letting go of constant care allowed resilience. In a small workshop where clocks once ticked loudly, there lived a man named Stefan who removed their chimes. He believed silence improved focus. At home, he removed his own clock entirely. Time continued. Letting go of marking allowed living. As the night moves deeper, the stories begin to feel like passing weather rather than events. They do not need to be followed. You may notice long stretches where words pass without meaning, or where meaning arrives without words. That is all right. There is nothing to hold. In a narrow room where moonlight reached the floor, there lived a woman named Talia who practiced standing very still. She believed stillness revealed truth. One night, she shifted her weight. Nothing was lost. Letting go of stillness allowed comfort. In a riverside town where bells rang irregularly, there lived a man named Yorn who tried to predict their pattern. He wrote it down carefully. The bells changed. Yorn stopped writing. He listened. Letting go of recording allowed presence. In a home near the edge of a forest, there lived a woman named Vesa who stacked firewood neatly. She liked clean lines. One winter storm scattered the pile. She restacked it loosely. The fire burned the same. Letting go of order allowed warmth. In a quiet schoolhouse, there lived a man named Alric who erased the board at the end of each day. He believed clean beginnings mattered. One day, he left the board half-written. The next class continued. Letting go of endings allowed continuity. As the night stretches on, effort dissolves further. The mind may no longer separate one story from another. This is not confusion. It is rest. You do not need to remember these lives. They are already doing their work. Letting go is not a single moment. It is a gentle leaning back into what is already happening. The paper folds, then unfolds. The lantern dims. The lake holds its shape without our help. And you may find that you are no longer listening in the way you were before. That is fine. The night is wide enough to carry the words without you. You can rest now, whether you notice it or not. Nothing needs to be held. Nothing needs to be finished. The night remains, quiet and steady, receiving whatever loosens next. The night has grown patient. It does not mind repetition. It does not mind silence. It stays, even when attention drifts. In a quiet border town, where two roads met and then parted again, there lived a man named Corbin who opened gates. His work was simple. Each morning, he unlocked a series of wooden gates along the road so travelers could pass. Each evening, he closed them again. The gates were old, built long ago to guide livestock and wagons. Now they mostly marked habit rather than necessity. Corbin liked the rhythm. Open. Close. Open. Close. The sound of hinges felt like punctuation in the day. Over time, fewer travelers came. Roads changed. New routes appeared. Some gates were no longer used at all. Corbin continued opening them anyway. One morning, he arrived to find one gate missing. The posts remained, but the gate itself had been removed, likely repurposed elsewhere. Corbin stood there, key in hand, unsure what to do. There was nothing to open. He walked on. The next day, he did not bring the key. Letting go sometimes begins when the task simply ends on its own. In a coastal inlet where water rose and fell gently, there lived a woman named Nola who painted tides. She returned to the same stretch of shore, painting the waterline at different hours. She liked seeing the changes layered together. Her paintings filled the walls of her small home. Lines overlapped. Colors softened one another. One day, she noticed she was painting less of the water and more of her memory of it. The tide had changed, but her hand followed an older line. She put the brush down. For several days, she simply watched the water without painting. When she returned to painting, the lines were freer. Letting go of recording allowed seeing again. In a stone village where evenings cooled quickly, there lived a man named Basile who repaired lantern glass. He replaced cracked panes, polished soot away. He believed light deserved clarity. At home, Basile kept a lantern that no longer worked. The glass was intact, but the wick holder was bent. He meant to fix it. Years passed. One night, sitting in darkness, Basile realized he liked the quiet more than the light. He never fixed the lantern. Letting go can mean recognizing when something is no longer needed. In a town with narrow canals and slow boats, there lived a woman named Etta who rowed passengers across short distances. Her boat was small, steady. She knew the current well. There was one passenger she remembered clearly, a man who crossed every day at the same hour. They exchanged nods, never words. One day, he did not come. Etta waited longer than usual, scanning the bank. Eventually, she rowed on. Days passed. The man did not return. Etta noticed the space his absence left, then noticed how the water moved just the same. Letting go does not always come with explanation. In a farming region where soil darkened after rain, there lived a man named Torin who tested earth. He scooped small samples, smelled them, rubbed them between his fingers. He advised others when to plant. One year, his advice failed. Weather shifted unexpectedly. Crops suffered. Torin felt unsettled. He realized he had been holding on to certainty rather than observation. He began watching again, without conclusions. Letting go of authority allowed humility. In a city where buildings pressed close together, there lived a woman named Serene who practiced handwriting. She copied old scripts carefully, believing beauty lay in form. Her pages were precise. One evening, tired, she let her hand relax. The letters slanted, spacing uneven. She liked it. Her writing changed after that. Letting go of form allowed expression. In a riverside settlement where children played near the water, there lived a man named Garo who carved whistles from reeds. He gave them away freely. One whistle he kept, carved perfectly. He never played it. One afternoon, a child asked about it. Garo handed it over. The child blew too hard. The whistle cracked. Garo smiled. Letting go can happen before we know why we were holding. In a hillside town where bells rang without pattern, there lived a woman named Serene who tried to memorize their timing. She believed understanding would bring comfort. The bells kept changing. Serene stopped counting. The sound became background. Letting go of analysis allowed peace. In a market square where vendors packed up at dusk, there lived a man named Risto who folded tents. He liked neatness. One evening, a tent was folded poorly by someone else. Risto felt irritation. He paused. The tent still stood the next day. Letting go of correction allowed ease. In a quiet room with one large window, there lived a woman named Unwind who watched clouds reflect on the glass. She enjoyed the shifting shapes. She began naming them, cataloging. The clouds moved too quickly. She stopped naming. Watching became simple again. Letting go of labeling allowed wonder. In a fishing town where nets hung drying along fences, there lived a man named Lucan who untangled knots. He was patient, careful. One net was too tangled to fix easily. Lucan worked at it for hours. Finally, he cut it. The net was used again. Letting go of saving allowed function. In a village where winter nights were long, there lived a woman named Kira who read by candlelight. She read slowly, savoring each page. One night, the candle burned out before she finished a chapter. She closed the book. Sleep came quickly. Letting go of completion allowed rest. In a wide open plain where stars were clear, there lived a man named Aaron who counted them as a child. He believed numbers gave meaning. As he grew older, he stopped counting. The sky did not diminish. Letting go of measurement allowed awe. In a small repair shop near a bridge, there lived a woman named Lisa who fixed bicycles. She aligned wheels carefully. One bike never aligned perfectly. Lisa adjusted again and again. Finally, she let it go. The bike rode fine. Letting go of exactness allowed motion. In a coastal hamlet where fog erased distance, there lived a man named Halim who waited for the fog to lift before leaving home. He believed clarity was necessary. One day, he left in the fog. He arrived. Letting go of waiting allowed living. As the night deepens even further, the stories no longer stand apart. They dissolve into a shared quiet. You may notice that the effort to follow has faded, that listening has become softer, less defined. This is not something to correct. Letting go does not require awareness of itself. It happens when the hands tire, when the mind loosens, when the night becomes wide enough to hold everything without sorting. The gates stand open. The lantern rests unlit. The whistle breaks, and the sound moves on. You do not need to remember Corbin, or Nola, or Basile, or Etta. They have already passed through. What remains is the same gentle space they discovered. Nothing needs to be decided. Nothing needs to be finished. The night is steady, and it is kind. And whatever you were holding, thoughts, stories, even the sense of being here can rest now. The night will keep going, whether you notice or not. The night no longer feels like something unfolding. It feels like something already complete, still moving, still breathing, but without urgency. We can rest inside that. In a village where the road narrowed before climbing into hills, there lived a woman named Isolde who swept dust from doorways. Not her own doorway only, but others as well. She did this quietly, early in the morning, before people noticed. She liked the feeling of beginnings made clean. At first, she told herself it was kindness. Then it became habit. Then it became responsibility. If she missed a morning, she felt uneasy. She imagined dust collecting, impressions being made where she had not passed. One morning, rain fell before she woke. The dust settled on its own. The doorways were clean without her. Isolde stood under the eaves, broom in hand, and felt a small release. She began sweeping only her own doorway. The village remained. Letting go can be trusting that the world has its own ways of settling. In a quiet valley where echoes softened quickly, there lived a man named Bram who practiced throwing stones into the river. He watched the ripples spread and fade. He liked knowing where the stone would land, how wide the circles would be. Over time, he grew skilled. His throws became precise. Then one day, he slipped and the stone flew sideways, disappearing into reeds. Bram felt irritation rise, then laughter. He stopped practicing. The river did not miss the stones. Letting go of mastery allowed play to end naturally. In a town where evening bells rang irregularly, there lived a woman named Lenya who tried to predict their sound. She marked times on scraps of paper, searching for pattern. The bells resisted. One night, tired, Lenya stopped listening for them. She noticed instead the pause between sounds. Sleep came easily. Letting go of pattern allowed quiet. In a small orchard near a bend in the road, there lived a man named Tovin, who gathered fallen fruit. He collected every apple that dropped, believing waste was wrong. He filled baskets daily. One season, there were too many. Fruit rotted faster than he could gather. Tovin felt overwhelmed. He left some apples on the ground. Birds came. Insects came. The soil darkened. The trees bore fruit again. Letting go of saving allowed renewal. In a narrow workshop lit by a single window, there lived a woman named Elski who sharpened knives. She believed sharpness was safety. She sharpened her own knives often, perhaps too often. One day, she cut herself. She paused, bandaged her hand, and sharpened less. The knife still worked. Letting go of excess care allowed balance. In a coastal town where waves struck rhythmically, there lived a man named Rayon who counted them. He told himself it was a way to stay present. He counted carefully, restarting when distracted. Eventually, he noticed the counting itself was the distraction. He stopped. The waves continued. Letting go of method allowed presence to remain. In a village square where pigeons gathered, there lived a woman named Morella who chased them away from benches. She believed cleanliness mattered. She waved her arms, clapped her hands. One day, she sat down without chasing them. The pigeons moved slightly. The bench remained usable. Morella rested. Letting go of control allowed coexistence. In a hillside settlement where roofs were low and close together, there lived a man named Ovid who adjusted shutters each evening. He believed the angle mattered for warmth and light. He adjusted them carefully, one by one. One night, he forgot a shutter. The house was still warm. He adjusted fewer shutters after that. Letting go of precision allowed comfort. In a forest edge home where leaves gathered daily, there lived a woman named Sarai who raked them into neat piles. She liked order. The leaves returned each day. One autumn, she stopped raking. Leaves covered the ground. Paths softened. Walking became quieter. Letting go of clearing allowed gentleness. In a quiet apartment where clocks once chimed, there lived a man named Petros who removed batteries from all but one. He wanted fewer reminders. Eventually, he removed the last one too. He woke anyway. Letting go of signals allowed rhythm to return. In a town where windmills turned slowly, there lived a woman named Amina who watched their blades. She tried to predict the wind. The wind changed. She watched without guessing. Letting go of prediction allowed seeing. In a low house near a stream, there lived a man named Kolya who stacked stones to guide water. He arranged them carefully, redirecting the flow. After a storm, the stones shifted. Kolya rebuilt them once, then stopped. The stream found its way. Letting go allowed movement. In a coastal bluff village where seabirds cried, there lived a woman named Aira who fed them at the same hour each day. She liked their arrival. One day, she did not come. The birds found food elsewhere. When she returned, they came again. Aira smiled. Letting go does not erase connection. In a narrow room filled with rolled fabrics, there lived a man named Soren who measured cloth twice before cutting. He believed caution prevented mistakes. One day, he cut without measuring. The cloth fit. He laughed. Letting go of caution allowed confidence. In a mountain hamlet where frost lingered, there lived a woman named Lotta who covered plants each night. She believed vigilance saved them. One night, she forgot. Some plants survived. Some did not. Spring came anyway. Letting go allowed acceptance. In a town by a slow river, there lived a man named Dane who watched reflections. He tried to capture them in sketches. The reflections shifted. He closed the sketchbook. The water remained. Letting go of capture allowed appreciation. In a schoolroom with tall windows, there lived a woman named Freya who erased the chalkboard completely each day. She believed clean slates mattered. One day, she left a faint trace. The lesson continued. Letting go of erasure allowed continuity. In a quiet lane where cats wandered freely, there lived a man named Uriel who tried to keep them off his steps. He chased them away repeatedly. One evening, he stopped. The cats slept. Uriel rested. Letting go allowed peace. In a bakery where the scent of bread lingered, there lived a woman named Noah who waited until loaves cooled fully before cutting. She believed patience preserved texture. One morning, she cut early. The bread was still good. Letting go of waiting allowed enjoyment. In a garden where vines climbed unpredictably, there lived a man named Idris who trained them along wires. He liked neat lines. One vine escaped. He let it grow. The garden softened. Letting go of order allowed life. As the night moves further into itself, these small lives no longer ask to be remembered. They do not need to be sorted or understood. They have already done their work. You may notice that your attention comes and goes now, without effort. That thoughts arrive less clearly, or not at all. This is not a mistake. Letting go is not something added. It is something removed. Quietly, layer by layer. The broom rests. The counting stops. The stones settle. And whatever remains of listening can rest too. There is nothing left to carry into the next moment. The night is wide, and it is enough. You can stay with it, or drift away from it. Either way, it holds you gently, without asking anything in return. The night has carried us a long way, through many lives, many hands opening and closing, through wells and boats, bells and letters, paths and fires. Nothing was asked to stay. Nothing was asked to disappear. We have been circling the same quiet truth again and again, that letting go is not a loss. It is a soft return. What was held too tightly learned how to rest. What was feared learned how to finish. What seemed unfinished found its own ending. Now, the stories themselves no longer need to be followed. They have already done their work. Understanding does not need to move forward anymore. It can settle, like dust after a long day, like water after a gentle disturbance. Somewhere along the way, effort has already softened. Thoughts may have slowed. The sense of listening may have thinned or drifted. That is all part of this same movement. The body is here, supported. Breath is happening on its own. Nothing needs to be adjusted or guided. If sleep has already come, it has come naturally. If it is still approaching, it will arrive when it is ready. There is no line to cross, no moment to catch. Everything we explored tonight points in the same direction, toward ease, toward release, toward trusting what does not need our grip. You do not need to carry any of this forward. Not the names, not the stories, not even the idea of letting go. The night will keep holding everything that loosens, just as it always has. And now, there is nothing more to add. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Calm Monk.